I want to get down to the heart of the matter. I've been talking about the California flora and what it really means to have an assemblage of species in any point in time or space, and how to think like a weed, act like a weed. But now I want to talk about some seaweeds, because this is the heart of the matter of a workshop for me, is to learn a few species that you'll see again in your life. And so I'm going to concentrate on some common seaweeds, and I won't be able to talk about enough of them, but let's go on. We're going to start with the rockweeds. It's a really important group all over the world in the temperate zone. Rockweeds are common upper mid intertidal species. So I'm going to start at the very top. If you're walking along the shore, at the very top of the intertidal, the highest prominence of rocks, you will find Pelvetiopsis limitata. Tufts of brownish yellow, Patrick, watch the colors here as we go along, brownish yellow axes, dichotomously branched, Y-shaped branching, swollen tips. These are called receptacles, and that's where their reproduction takes place. So you can see, this is a close-up, you can see those receptacles just forming. The young ones are just little flat blades. Pelvetiopsis was once known as Pelvetia. Pelvetia is a European genus. This was transferred to Pelvetiopsis. Opsis means looks like, because it's not related very closely to Pelvetia at all. Notice there's no midrib. There's no lump of tissue down the middle of these blades. They're just completely smooth. Now let's look at some other species, and you can, by comparing them, see the differences. Here's another species of Pelvetiopsis, Pelvetiopsis californica. Also flat dichotomous blades, Y-shaped dichotomies here. But look how different it looks from Pelvetiopsis limitata. It's much flatter. It has a midrib down the middle, a thickening down the middle. It has kind of ruffled edges. Pelvetiopsis limitata is very smooth and dense, not as thin as this. And it has these lines of white hairs. There are two parallel lines of white hairs along the blade. So it's a pretty distinctive weed. Here are the receptacles. They're oval, almond-shaped. These are kind of puffed up because they've been out of the water and the gases inside are expanding slightly. Pelvetiopsis californica, much more common in Southern California, but it gets all the way up to Monterey Bay and a little bit further than that. Rockweeds, rockweeds. Notice the color variation within the species, different examples. So here, this is Pointerina again. This is the mid-intertidal, upper, really the upper intertidal. And you can see lots of rockweeds mixed in here with other species. So this is the kind of zone we're seeing where these rockweeds occur. This is a very common species in the north, not common in the south. This is Fucus disticus, described by Linnaeus, an old genus. Notice it too has flat dichotomous blades, not very rippled like Pelvetiopsis californica. And the receptacles are long and flat and pointed. Some are blunt, but some of them are quite pointed. Look at these long receptacles, so different from Pelvetiopsis. See the midrib here? And this is kind of a greenish color, isn't it? I call it, GI special green army uniform color. But this is a brown seaweed too. Midrib, dichotomous, flat, pointed receptacles. Another common rockweed, Silvetia compressa. This too was a Pelvetia, but it's not related to the European genus at all. And in fact, it's named after my mentor, Paul Silva. Different from Fucus, different from Pelvetiopsis. It's much more straggly. It's not as flat, it's more or less compressed and maybe even cylindrical at the base. And it has very narrow, pointed, small receptacles. And it's just kind of crazily, it's basically dichotomous, but it's kind of crazy. Look, I made a close-up here of a younger plant. It's not as regular as Pelvetiopsis and Fucus. So do you see what kind of characters I'm pointing out to help you discern these rockweeds? I'm looking at the blade, whether it's flat or compressed, whether it has a midrib, and then the shapes of those tips, those receptacles. Silvetia compressa is common in the Southern California mainland, and it comes all the way up to Northern California. But there's a subspecies called Silvetia compressa subspecies deliquescens that occurs on the Southern islands only. So this has genetically differentiated from Silvetia compressa enough, both in DNA sequence and in appearance, actually, to be considered geographically distinct from compressa. It's called deliquescens, which means sort of melting and pouring, because it's much narrower and it kind of just pours down the rocks. So does compressa, but look how narrow all the axes are. They're very, very fine, and they tend to be bleached out by high light to this golden color. And they can often form a big golden zone in the intertidal. Very common, San Clemente Island, Catalina Island. Silvetia compressa can occasionally occur on the northern islands. It's a much more northern affiliated species than deliquescens. Irregular blades, compressed rather than flattened, no midrib in sight, and very narrow receptacles. So my hope, of course, is that you'll look at the intertidal, that even if you can't collect, you can walk and enjoy and discern some of these species. Can you tell what species this is? Or this? Flat, midrib. Can't see the receptacles very well. This is Fucus, these dark green clumps. This, Silvetia, much more irregular, compressed rather than flattened. So even without the receptacles, you can see that their bodies are different. Compare this one with this one. I want to talk to you about how these things persist in time and space through their life history. The rockweed life history is a lot like our own, so let's start with our own. We have a couple of humans here. One's a male, one's a female. Females retain eggs in their bodies. And we are diploid, aren't we? We have two sets of chromosomes, one from our mother and one from our father. When an egg is fertilized, that egg grows. Here's the egg, here's the male gamete. These are haploid, one set of chromosomes. One set of chromosomes plus one set of chromosomes makes two sets of chromosomes in the zygote, and we're in the diploid phase, and we grow into a new little human and are born into the world like my grandnephew was last week, to my great joy. So you can see here that the red is diploid, the yellow is haploid. We go, the great wheel of life history turns between fertilization of an egg or an egg-like structure and the reduction of cells by meiosis into haploid gametes or haploid spores. So bear in mind our own life history when I go through some of these seaweed life histories. Now let's see how similar Fucus, Pelvetiopsis and Silvetia are to us. Here's our rockweed, and I so-called drawn this baby. There are receptacles at the tip which bear the gametes. So with rockweeds, the gametes are released, but they're released to the surface of the plant. The sort of a fucus mucus layer in the plant, the egg is released. In our flora, the rockweeds are monoecious, both sexes are in one body, but usually they don't mature at the same time, so it won't cross with itself. Instead, that egg is released and a male gamete from another plant swims over at high tide and fertilizes that egg, which is then dropped as a zygote. So the receptacles, through the process of meiosis, produce eggs and male gametes. They 1N plus 1N equals a 2N zygote that drops down, preferably in the canopy of a rockweed where it's damp and comfortable, and grows into a new rockweed. So this is a very simple life history with only one free living phase, the rockweed. Our eggs are not free living. Our gametes are not free living in any way. They're just sprung out into the world to either make it or fake it or go. One free living phase in this diploid dominant life history. That free living creature is diploid. Are you with me so far? Do you see the resemblances between humans who are also diplontic and rockweeds? So that's a good life history to kind of review your ancient biology, perhaps. Remember the process of meiosis, reduction division from 2N to 1N, and fertilization or syngamy from 1N to 2N. And so the wheel turns. And we have a population of rockweeds producing these gametes, getting them fertilized, dropping them, and increasing the population.